I'm getting sent to the one in front of it. And I was like. I'm walking past, and she like looked at me one time, and I was like, who? Paul.
Oh, yeah.
I was just like. They didn't say anything, it was just like on the way out, she was just like.
No, you know, Suzanne was awesome. She like met with me 2 times, go over everything, and then she came up with the chat guys told her about the template. She like, it's good, and like it was great. I had no issues. I really helped a lot. Yeah.
You ready? You should have feedback. Test, test. Okay. Perfect. It's in there somewhere.
They got the one on the top.
Yeah,
I was like, "Who's in the summer?"
I didn't even need to do that. I will, that thing is split over.
Was it? Oh, okay, I couldn't remember. I think. Okay, I couldn't remember. Sometimes they. But I can't remember. Right, yes, I didn't know if that was gonna. I knew there was a way to do it. I was sort of like, okay. And then I couldn't remember if I did it the last time or not.
Yeah, I don't think we did, but I'm glad we did it now.
Okay.
Yeah,
So, yeah, you guys had a lot of them. That'll work, so.
I just always like to make sure that the clicker works, you know, click out, it tends to like not go back to the presentation.
Oh, sometimes
Yeah.
they go to sleep.
Yeah, so I just have to like, I just try to click back on the actual.
Oh, yeah. But, yeah, cause I
Yeah.
went out.
I usually forget and.
Yeah, I went out
You
and-
can't, you put them on your app.
Yeah, I forget about that too, cause I made other stuff go away, but I'm thinking it's gone now, so I'm in the window, but I'm really not.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's behind it. And
Yeah.
So I was thinking, oh, I'm on there, what's the matter? So, yeah. I got down the corner, but I got my back forward. That's not where you had the,
Yeah. That's what we would- yeah.
but I have it in mind. Okay. I can't. Yeah, I think that's,
Just remember to put back my deal. It's hide. I think I got it this way. This one. That's here. The video panel. There it is. There we go. Oh. Keyboard.
So, we're gonna leave this on until like, right by, until we're live. When we're live, if you mind, just go into the next slide. That shows all of the. Ways to.
Hey, doing good, how are you? Yeah. Something on ECS study. This is the same thing as last time. That's so less. Some things, are not talked about. And so, we have to talk about it, everything's like, this is my love, but the next, like, you know, that's this, like, you know, the video. But I like that it's really pushing up the slide. Working on it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I listed our next lines. What? Oh, oh, I did that too. We have rest tag.
I think that's.
Oh, yeah. I used to. They have more computer.
I haven't, well, I usually add it to my total now, yeah. Because I put it to the. You have a. Yeah.
Yeah.
We in order, by name.
Oh, is this by?
I don't know if that's probably.
No, it's present. We're wondering. Oh. I'm very into that one. What is what? Well, it's fascinating. There are very few people who actually find.
Yeah. There's a lot of it. I was gonna say something. Yeah, potentially.
Hey, oh my God. I was like,
Like that.
And I don't really, as long as it's close enough, I'll answer.
Have you typed in Eric and Roman on there?
Yeah, and there's also Lana Vanderpool. So we're getting that. Yeah. That's it, you were very. That's exactly it. Give me 6 minutes.
Okay. She's got her under control. I think Bill told me that. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, it's. Yeah. All right. It's not like that's silly thing. This really is. I think we get it. Yeah, I think you would. But yeah, that's very. I feel bad.
That's exactly it. Like, oh.
So then after that.
They're going up and down to ensure that it's solid. All they want to do is do this in the team. There's karaoke. So there's karaoke, there's rock, interactive karaoke. And yes, I get that.
Where am I? Go like also. Thanks, Julie.
When they did that. Test.
Or looking like this outside, the natural.
Okay, good afternoon. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to all of you who have joined us in person and for everybody who's joined us online today. Thank you for choosing to spend a little time with us to hear about a few of our latest activities that we're working on to help make your transportation system better. I'm Shannon Stevenson. I'm a senior program manager with the Council of Governments. I oversee our transit program for the agency, which includes everything from providing funding to transit agencies to managing short-range transit plans and studies. So today we are conducting a hybrid public meeting, meaning we are live here in Arlington at the NCT COG offices and also live on the web and via the phone. For this meeting, we will hear first from today's presenters, then we will open the floor to questions and comments for those in person. We'll hear those in-person comments first, followed by live phone comments, and then finally those comments that were submitted through the meeting webpage or text messages. For those participating in the meeting virtually, please note that the only way to provide an oral comment during the meeting is to call in over the phone. Now, I will quickly review the instructions for providing comments by phone or text message. For participation by phone, dial 855-925-2801. You will hear a prompt to enter a meeting code. Please enter 2463. You will then be able to listen to the meeting audio. There are also options for providing a comment by phone. You may leave a voicemail with your comment by pressing *2. And so that would be star, then the number 2. If you would like to request to ask a question or provide a live comment during the meeting, press *, then the number 3. You will be placed in a speaker queue, but continue to hear the meeting audio until it is your turn to speak. If you wish to text a comment, text NCTCOG June 23 to 855-925-2801. After you text the code, you will receive a reply prompting you to submit your comment. Keep in mind that your carrier standard messaging rates will apply. In addition, written comments may be submitted in the comment box at the bottom of the meeting webpage at publicinput.com/NCTCOG June 23. Don't worry if you didn't get all those instructions. I'll review everything again after our presentations. So today I want to give you a brief overview of what we'll be talking about and who we have with us. So first up, we have Transit Strategic Partnerships that Julie Anderson will give us an update. Martin Bate will give us an update on Automated Transportation System Development Study. And then Savannah Nance will provide the EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grants Program. The Regional Scrap Tire Program will be presented by Nicholas Van Hossen, and the federal performance measures for National Highway System pavement and bridge assets will be presented by John Starnes. And then finally, Vicki Alexander will provide an update on our fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 Unified Planning Work Program. In addition to the presentations, we also have online review and comment available for proposed modifications to the list of funded projects. This is a comprehensive list of funded transportation projects through 2026 that is maintained in our Transportation Improvement Program, otherwise known as the TIP. Projects with committed funds from federal, state, and local sources are included in the TIP. And to maintain an accurate project listing, this document is updated on a regular basis and posted online for review and comment. We also have additional resources and information available, such as the Regional Transportation Council's partnership with the Juneteenth Museum. We have the Mobility 2045. We have an update for administrative revisions available. Then we also have our interactive public input that you can map your experience and tell us all about your transportation experiences. And then finally, we have vehicle incentive and funding opportunities available that is posted online for review. So with that, I just want to note that the print copies of all meeting materials can be mailed upon request. The comment period for these topics began today and will end on July, I believe it's 11th. Yes, July 11th. Again, we will hold all questions and comments until our final presentation for today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Julie Anderson.
Great. Thank you, Shannon. Good afternoon. I'm Julie Anderson, a senior planner on the Transit Management and Planning team. Today I'll be giving a briefing on our Transit Strategic Partnerships program. So to understand this program and where the funds come from, I first need to provide some background, starting first with defining the different roles the organization plays in transit funding. So the North Central Texas Council of Governments is the overall agency made up of several departments, such as Aging Services, Economic Development, Workforce Solutions, 911, and Transportation. NCTCOG assists local governments in planning and cooperating for regional mutual benefit in a 16-county region. For transit funding, the Executive Board approves receipt of federal transit funding for the region, which I will elaborate on later in this presentation. Within NCTCOG is the Transportation Department, which acts as the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, for the region. MPOs are federally mandated and it is through MPOs that all federal funding flows to our state. All federal funding in the region must be programmed in the Transportation Improvement Program, also known as the TIP. As the MPO, the Transportation Department also coordinates transportation planning for the 16-county region, including required planning documents that address transportation needs for older adults, individuals with disabilities, and individuals with lower incomes. That document is known as Access North Texas. The MPO, as the Transportation Department, is the designated recipient of federal transit funding, which is allocated annually through a non-competitive formula process. COG and the MPO administer the federal transit funds as the designated recipient. This designated federal funding area is smaller than the region-wide 16-county area and is instead limited to the urbanized area boundary of 8 counties, as you will see on this map here. So this map shows the entire 16-county region covered by the overall COG agency. And then the green, yellow, and purple areas are the urbanized areas per 2010 census designation that receive federal transit funding and that the MPO administers. So federal funding for transit comes from the U.S. Department of Transportation, which appropriates funds that are authorized by Congress and the President. Funding amounts are apportioned by federal formula process, meaning they are non-competitive, to the Federal Transit Administration, or the FTA, which in turn then distributes those funds to designated recipients in the urbanized areas. In our capacity as the MPO, COG then distributes or sub-allocates the federal funds to transit authorities and providers in our urbanized area, which are the Dallas-Fort Worth-Arlington UZA and the Denton-Lewisville UZA. So the McKinney urbanized area, the McKinney UZA actually falls under TxDOT as it is considered small urban. Again, that's from the 2010 census population. So of all the federal formula funding programs for transit, there are 2 that are relevant to today's topic, Section 53.7 and Section 53.10. As I just discussed, these programs are reauthorized through Congress and the President and then receive their annual funding through appropriation bills. So 53.7 funds include job access, reverse commute projects, and must be used to serve the general public, including low-income populations, and it can also be used for capital, operating, or planning projects. 53.10 funds are to be used for capital or operating projects that address the needs of elderly or individuals with disabilities. So in fiscal year 21, approximately $136 million in the FTA 53.7 and 53.10 formula funds were apportioned for public transportation providers in the North Central Texas urbanized areas. There are 2 processes to distribute these funds into our region. So most of the formula funds are distributed to providers through the annual Program of Projects process, which is non-competitive. The RTC has a policy to set aside about 2% of these formula funds for transit projects that support the regional long-range transportation plan, Mobility 2045, and Access North Texas. This policy led to the creation of the Transit Strategic Partnerships Program. So this program, it's a competitive funding program that supports transit project ideas and implements services that address Mobility 2045 and Access North Texas. This was formerly known as Call for Projects, and we changed the process to be this so that it could be more reactive to needed projects in the area. So eligible applicants can be transit authorities, rural providers, and even nonprofits, although they do need to partner with an existing transit provider to ensure collaboration and that services aren't being duplicated within the urbanized area. The program is meant to fund projects for a pilot length, which is typically 2 to 3 years. Funding cannot go towards making up operating shortfalls, but instead to new or expanded services that address needs of those with low income, elderly, or persons with disabilities. The program wants to encourage partnerships and collaboration between non-service providers and transit providers. Oftentimes, their services would overlap, so them working together is always a good plus. Proposed projects should address innovation, the Access North Texas Plan, and any recent transit study recommendations, in addition to increasing accessibility and targeting environmental justice populations, and transit-dependent populations. So as noted previously, this program is a competitive process, and therefore there are evaluation criteria. Eligible project proposals that are submitted to the Transit Strategic Partnerships Program are evaluated on 4 criteria. So there is a needs assessment, strategic value and innovation, funding and sustainability, and implementation capacity and collaboration. A selection committee reviews the proposals with this evaluation criteria. There isn't a minimum amount of points a proposal needs to be eligible for funding. Rather, the points provide a way to measure projects collectively and objectively and assess if it's truly ready for implementation and meets all the goals and requirements of the program. We work very closely with applicants and provide detailed feedback. And oftentimes, if a proposal isn't ready, we work with them throughout the next months to apply again. The funding cycle for the program runs in coordination with the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP cycle, which is modified quarterly. So while ideas and proposals are accepted on a rolling basis, they are evaluated twice a year. We just wrapped up a program cycle with proposals that were due at the end of May. The selection committee is reviewing proposals this month and should be ready by August to announce. Some proposals may need more development and therefore can get shifted to the next cycle. Those that do move forward for funding can make the next TIP modification cycle, with federal funding approval occurring about 5 to 6 months later. Once projects are selected, funding amounts that are available for these programs will be updated and added to the website. Program information can be found on the COG website at this link on the slide, which is nctcog.org/strategic partnerships-transit, or you can also email us at our program email, which is transit.spp@nctcog.org. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Julie. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Martin Bate. I'm a transportation planner here at the North Central Texas Council of Governments, working on the Metropolitan Transportation Plan team. And today I'm here to give you an update on our ATS development study. ATS, we love our acronyms here in government, and ATS stands for Automated Transportation Systems. You might also know them as people mover systems, and perhaps the most salient or most familiar one to y'all is the Skylink system over in DFW. What we wanted to do was come up with guidelines and an understanding of where the new people mover or ATS market is. We wanted to review emerging technology innovations in the ATS market and really focus on future-proofing our infrastructure. And we wanted to provide our users with demand responsive transportation rather than having to rely on a system that comes by on a fixed schedule. Another one of the goals, pardon me, of this project was to reduce the long-term risks of obsolescence of infrastructure. We've seen in a few different APM deployments throughout the country that oftentimes when you end up with one particular vendor and one particular provider of technology and vehicles, it can become very expensive, often prohibitively so, to keep that system running long-term. We also wanted to come up with solutions that do not require a custom guideway to operate this vehicle. In other words, when you have a vehicle running, we wanted the actual guideway, the track that it's running on, to be as simple as possible. We want that guidance and the way that the vehicle moves around to be done all on board the vehicle instead of having to rely on a specific track that only works for one type of vehicle. Another goal of our project was to achieve economies of scale. Now, the way that we're hoping to do that is through 2 methods. One is through the use of modular infrastructure, where we can purchase components of a guideway system in bulk, hopefully, and be able to use those to deploy and build different guideway systems and different ATS systems throughout the region. The other economy of scale can be achieved through independent running ATS vehicles. Again, here the idea was to disconnect the vehicle from the infrastructure. Not unlike our own personal vehicles today, it doesn't matter what kind of car you drive, whether it's a small sports car or a big SUV, they can all run on the same public roadways. And we're hoping that we can do the same thing with ATS vehicles, where a smart and thoughtful design for the guideways with this modular infrastructure will then enable us to use different kinds of vehicles based on whatever's the best available on the market and what best meets the needs of our partner cities. We also wanted to look at both movement of people, which harkens back to what I mentioned about people movers, but also cargo and goods movement. We believe that there are a lot of opportunities within the region for having automated systems and vehicles that can move cargo rather than having to rely on people operating vehicles. And that's what we tasked our consultant and ourselves with finding out. So here we have a conceptual rendering of our people mover system. Again, this is a very conceptual, generic concept, but the idea is that we want to convey both a lightweight modular guideway system, and we see here that I think at least it looks a little more innovative and a little more modern than a standard large concrete structure or bridge, as it were. The vehicle there, also a conceptual rendering. It's not any particular vehicle, but it was certainly, the design was informed by a lot of the different vehicles we saw during our research. So the elements of our study, we had 4 elements to it. Lee and Elliott Incorporated, they served as the consultant for our study, and they did excellent work in getting all this together. We really could not have done it without them. The first element was the vehicle technologies, and the big deliverable we got out of that was an inventory of existing vehicle technologies. This runs the gamut from small, what we call group rapid transit vehicles that operate rather similarly to existing APM vehicles, all the way to autonomous vehicles that have a lot of onboard technology that allows them to go down a guideway and go down to different stations, all done on board. It doesn't have to rely on any sort of track or any sort of infrastructure beyond just whatever it can see. The next thing we looked at, wireless electric vehicle charging technologies. And what we really wanted to focus on here was something called dynamic charging, and I'll get into the details of that in a bit. But again, what we wanted to see was what the current market looks like, how ready it is for different types of wireless charging, and whether or not we would be able to deploy that into our future pilot projects. The third element was the standard guideway infrastructure design. And again, I think I've kind of belabored the point here, but we wanted a signature appearance, something that looked new and modern, that a person walking down the street, whether it's in Dallas, in Plano, in Fort Worth, can look at it and go, that's our regional ATS system. They're probably not going to actually think that's our regional ATS system, but hopefully they'll at least think that looks pretty cool and pretty modern. I would like to go try that out. And finally, our case studies. The case studies were pretty much informed by these 3 different elements. Within the case studies, we had 2 different categories: retrofit opportunities and pilot project opportunities. So looking at some existing systems and how we might modernize them, and then looking at opportunities for new developments that would really take advantage of the insights that we got from this report. So within the identification of the vehicles, again, we assessed the current and emerging market for ATS vehicles because, as I'm sure you all are aware, transportation technology is constantly evolving, and especially at a rapid clip in the last few years. And so we wanted to know what's currently available, what also might realistically be available within the next few years. We evaluated them using multiple criteria. A lot of that was dimensions, understanding how large they were, the capacity that they have for passengers or cargo, the payloads that they can carry, as well as the other considerations such as speed, as average operating speed, et cetera. And the result of that was an inventory of state-of-the-art ATS vehicle technologies. And the 2 examples that we have here on screen, on top is a people mover ATS from Zoox, and below is an Oceaneering freight movement sort of pallet, I guess you could call it. It's a large platform that you can just put heavy objects on, and it will follow its way from A to B, no user input needed. When we talk about the wireless charging component, there are 2 different types of wireless charging that you need to be aware of. The first is stationary or opportunity charging, and the second is dynamic charging. Now, stationary charging is very similar to what a lot of us probably use today with our phones. There's wireless charging available for your phone. You put it on a pad, and it uses magnetic induction to charge it. It's the same exact concept for the vehicles, but on a larger scale with a lot more juice behind it. We really wanted to focus on dynamic charging, though. And the reason for that is twofold. One is that we thought that it would potentially allow us to reduce the battery size or the needed battery size on any vehicle that gets deployed. And the other was to potentially reduce fleet requirements. Right now, with an electric vehicle, much like a gas vehicle, it runs and it runs and it runs, and eventually it runs out of juice. And at that point, it has to go stop somewhere and charge up. With a gas vehicle, just as it is with our personal vehicles, that's pretty simple. You go and refuel it, takes a minute or two at most. With an electric vehicle, there is a longer period for charging. Even if you have a Tesla supercharger that goes in 15 or so minutes, that's still 15 minutes that the vehicle has to be out of service. So what we're thinking is that with dynamic charging, where the vehicle can actually drive along a roadway that has the same wireless charging infrastructure, except it can charge while it's moving, then hopefully that means that you don't need to have as many vehicles in your fleet, because each vehicle will be able to retain its charge and keep it charged up longer, and therefore not have to go out of service as often. We did find that right now dynamic charging is in its infancy. There are a lot of companies that are developing this technology. They're working on testing it out. There's a few deployments. One of them is out in Sweden, and another in Tel Aviv. And then up in Michigan, there's a deployment being done by the Michigan Department of Transportation. But it's still in its infancy. There's still a lot of potential there, and we're going to keep a very close eye on it. Our guideway design guidelines, this gets a little technical, so I won't necessarily bore you with the details, but the idea was, again, a simple structure, lightweight, signature appearance with innovative materials and methods. We assess different materials and techniques for criteria such as environmental sustainability, the actual costs, both of implementation and the life cycle, and even considerations such as risks of hazards such as fire. If you've been watching the news, you saw that over the weekend there was a slight problem with a bridge over in Philadelphia on I-95. That's exactly the sort of thing we want to avoid with something like this. For instance, one of the materials that we've investigated was something called a fiber reinforced polymer, basically a fancy name for plastic. And plastic is very useful in a lot of situations, and we think it could work well for some components of a guideway, but we will definitely want to make sure that whatever components we use are properly rated by the appropriate authorities to withstand certain things such as fire. All that to say is we did come up with some very good guidelines on how we can deploy and design a guideway that meets these criteria. It's likely going to use lightweight concrete and then fiber reinforced polymer for the decking. Here we have another conceptual rendering of our goods movement system. Again, the idea being this is just to show what it might look like with an interface between a factory or distribution center going over to a railhead. As you can see in the bottom left corner, we would ideally have some trains there to pick up cargo from these freight movement systems. Last but not least, our pilot and retrofit opportunities. So the two pilot projects that are sort of the new developments, one is the Dallas International District, which is the site of the former Valley View Galleria Mall. And what we looked at there and what this study informed us on were the potential vehicles we could use, as well as the guideway materials that we could utilize to build this guideway or the people mover system for the International District. We also have a cargo pilot with the GM Arlington Assembly right down the road. And this study informed us on potential vehicles and also performed a high-level fleet analysis to determine approximately how many vehicles would be needed in order to meet GM's needs. And then our retrofit opportunities are the Las Colinas modernization concept, where we would do a pilot study to modernize the Las Colinas APT, and then a suitability analysis of modernizing DFW Airport Skylink. Now with the DFW Airport Skylink, we really just looked at how a modernization would look and what considerations DFW would need to make in order to do it. And the biggest takeaway was that any modernization will require major studies and consideration on how to retain and maintain operations and people movement during the modernization phase, because Skylink is pretty crucial to the operation of DFW, and any modernization, you'd want to minimize the disruption to passengers. Here's a conceptual rendering of the Las Colinas system. So all we did, real simple. Well, I say it's simple. All we did was we took a photo of our Las Colinas system and we put in a rendering of how it would look with the guideway sort of retrofitted, removing some of the old trackage and putting in a flat system, and then having our little people mover vehicles going back and forth. And so that concludes my presentation on the ATS development study. We're looking forward to continuing this process and moving forward with certain pilot projects, including a potential design of that aforementioned Las Colinas modernization. Here's my contact information. You can also find more at nctcog.org or nctcog.org/ATS. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Next, we have Savannah talking a little bit about our EPA Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program.
Thank you. My name is Savannah Nance. I'm a senior air quality planner on our air quality team, and I'm here to give you an overview of the Environmental Protection Agency's Climate Pollution Reduction Grants Program, or CPRG. So this is a new program that was created by the Inflation Reduction Act that is being administered by the EPA. And the goal of this grant program is to develop and implement a regional plan to reduce greenhouse gases and other harmful air pollutants, such as criteria pollutants. So because the goal of this program is to develop and implement plans, the EPA has split this up into 2 phases. The first phase, there is $250 million available for planning grants to develop these regional plans. And then for the second phase, there's $4.6 billion in competitive implementation grants, which will let you implement the plan that was developed. And we have provided a link at the bottom of the slide deck to the EPA's page if you'd like to read more. So why we want to give you some information about air quality in our region and why we want to participate. So 10 counties in our region are in non-attainment for ground level ozone. The EPA has to set levels of what is safe for 6 criteria pollutants. So that's ozone, lead, nitrogen oxides, particulate matter, sulfur dioxide. And 10 of our counties do not meet the standard for ground level ozone. So those are in the pink on the map. So as you saw earlier, the CPRG program lets us prioritize creating a plan that reduces greenhouse gases and criteria pollutants. So we believe the development of this plan and the implementation of it would help us bring our region into attainment for ozone and improve the overall air quality in our region. And just a little bit of information about how ground level ozone is formed. When heat is combined with VOCs, or volatile organic compounds, and oxides of nitrogen, or NOx, that creates ground level ozone. And VOC and NOx can come from a lot of different sources. And that's what you see on this chart right here. Heat, of course, we live in Texas, so there's plenty of heat and sunlight. But the NOx in our region is actually primarily produced from the transportation sector. So that's on-road, off-road vehicles. Because we are in non-attainment for ground level ozone, there are health impacts of this. So the EPA researches this and then they provide information on it. But in areas that are in non-attainment for ground level ozone, you will have higher rates of childhood asthma. It's more difficult to breathe, coughing and sore throat. So there's a lot of health impacts to us being in non-attainment for ground level ozone. So as I said, it is our hope that the development of a regional plan to improve our air quality through the CPRG will help benefit everyone. So we did meet with our local governments and we discussed applying and they were supportive. So we have submitted an application to the EPA. We are waiting to hear back if we will be awarded. If we are, we will be responsible for coordinating with our local governments and the public to create one regional plan on behalf of the entire Metropolitan Statistical Area, or MSA. So that is what's outlined in the blue, is those 11 counties. That is the DFW Arlington Metropolitan Statistical Area. However, we are allowed to include additional counties if we would like, and we have decided Hood County has to be included in the regional plan, so we will be including them and any other counties that wish to be included as well. So after we hear back from the EPA, if we are awarded, we will have to create 3 deliverables, and those are detailed at the bottom of the slide. That will be a priority climate action plan, a comprehensive climate action plan, and then we'll have to submit a status report in 2027. So just for a little more information on what's going to be included in those plans, for the priority climate action plan, one of the first things we have to do is do an inventory of the emissions and pollutants in our region. And then based off the results of that inventory, we are going to work with local governments and the public to identify what measures or projects do we want to put in our plan to help reduce emissions and improve air quality. So for the priority climate action plan, we're going to be looking for kind of short-term projects that could be built pretty quickly, such as installing solar. That's usually pretty easy and is something that can be done now. We will also have to do what's called a benefits analysis. So that'll be talking to the community about beyond air quality, what do you want prioritized? Is it decreasing energy costs? Is it more accessible public transit, whatever it is? So we'll be talking to the communities and asking them what projects do they want prioritized that have other benefits. We will also have to make sure our local governments have the authority to build out the projects that are requested by the public. The comprehensive climate action plan is just going to build on the priority climate action plan. So it's just going to have some extra elements to it, such as targets and projections. It will also have to have a workforce planning analysis. So if we decide we want to build a lot of solar in our region to help reduce energy costs and then also support our communities, there might be a need for some more solar technicians. And then the status report that we'll submit in 2027 is just going to be an update on the implementation of the plan and all of the elements that are included in it. So good news, we have actually already started a greenhouse gas emissions inventory. So this is going to help us kind of narrow down what sectors need to be targeted for projects and measures to improve air quality. So you can see from this map that transportation is the main source, or I'm sorry, energy is the main source, of transportation being the second largest. And then the energy is actually broken out into different sources, so residential, commercial, and industrial. One thing to point out is towards the bottom left, you can see in kind of small text that the DFW 12 County MPA produces over 100 million CO2e every year. And then on the right-hand side, we have a comparison that the US total CO2e is 6.3 billion metric tons. So that's a comparison of what we're producing in DFW versus what the US produces. So 100 million metric tons of CO2e is kind of hard to understand. So we did some comparisons for you. So 100 million metric tons of CO2e is equivalent to 28 coal-fired power plants. It's the equivalent to 12 trillion smartphones being charged, or 10 billion gallons of diesel being consumed. Our emissions inventory will be broken down by sector. So we included one sector just as an example. So previously you saw that transportation was the second largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions in our region. So this is broken down by what is transportation or what is considered in the transportation. So the majority of it is from on-road sources, but there is a small portion from aviation and rail, and then about 8% produced by off or non-road sources. You can also see on the right-hand side the counties that are producing the most emissions. And then, of course, for transportation, it does make sense that Dallas and Tarrant, having the largest population and the most highways running through them, they do have the most greenhouse gases being produced. So assuming we are awarded, we should hear back in the summer if we are awarded. We do want to have a virtual kickoff meeting with the public where we talk a little more about the CPRG and also the greenhouse gas inventory that we are finishing up right now. So we will be promoting that once we know when it's going to be, but it should be this summer. Assuming we are awarded, we plan to have in-person meetings in the community to help get your input on what kind of projects you want us to put into these plans. We will also have virtual meetings to update you on the development of the plans, And then also virtual engagement opportunities such as surveys ongoing for the next couple of years, assuming we are awarded. So if you would like more information, we do have a public input project page specifically for this program. So that is linked at the bottom of the page. And then as a reminder, if you're interested in more of the air quality work our team does, we do have these air quality handbooks and they're available in multiple languages. That has a lot more detail about the air quality in our region right now and the projects and programs that we are implementing to help improve it. There's our contact information, and please reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Savannah. Fingers crossed we get that funding. So up next, we have Nick to talk about our regional scrap tire program.
All right, thank you. So as a response to a bunch of the issues that have came up from local governments and also some of the public considerations, we've had a lot of reports over there being abandoned tires in the region and outside, especially in the rural areas. So with all that, we decided that we were going to help with the taking additional actions and therefore create a regional scrap tire program, which we are here to present on today. So with that, the first thing that we need to talk about is some of the issues within the region. So on the, scrap tires, there's a number of different issues that go on. To just elicit a few of these, the economical impact is actually quite profound. It's really expensive and inconvenient for people to actually dispose of them. So not just citizens, you have your normal charges of $4 to $5 pop for normal residential tires for whenever you drop them off at NTB or another store. But whenever you have these mom and pop shops, these small entities that they amass a load of tires and then no one actually wants them. So they'll end up having all these tires that are pulled in the back of their warehouses or in their sheds or something like that. And it's difficult for them to actually, one, get them disposed of because of scheduling constraints, and two, it's expensive for them to do so at one time in bulk. So not only, so that leads into multiple other issues of, at that point, one of the next lines that people can do is illegally dump. So people will go through and they'll end up illegally dumping these tires on roadways, creeks, private properties. And then there's not a lot of different enforcement opportunities that occur because these are all, more often than not, areas that people have found that there are no cameras, there aren't people reporting on it, and other people have already gotten away with it. So what's the harm of one or two more tires, especially on the side of the road? So at that point, there's lack of ordinances, lack of education, lack of adequate markets. So as I said earlier, most people don't want these tires, and that includes the landfills. They actually turn away tires all the time. You can't even put whole tires in there anymore. They have to be shredded. So that's why it ends up being that these tires just increase in capacity in these landfills really quickly and they don't break down. So more often than not, people attribute the this whole tire issue to be more rural areas instead of more the incorporated areas like their inner core counties. However, that's not entirely the case, as I'll show you later on in this presentation. So ideally, this is the proper disposal of a tire. So this is the proper end of life tire cycle. So at the generator side, that's the generation of a scrap tire. A tire is no longer there for its benefit, for its normal usage. And so it ends up getting transported from someone ultimately over to a scrap tire facility. Scrap tire facility holds on to it and then disposes of it in a beneficial means. A proper means. So that proper means can be disposal to the landfill, or it can be used as a recycling agent for one of these beneficial uses that are described here. So that's a tire derived fuel. So that's being used to burn for a fuel usage. The crumb rubber, so that's your different aggregates for construction, things like that. You can fully recycle it. You can fully recycle parts of a tire so you can get some of the rubber, the metal components back out. You can also do these LRPUTs. So LRPUTs are land reclamation projects using tires. So that is essentially using tires to help with different things of basically structural support for irrigation and things of that nature, because tires don't break down over time like other sources might. And then there are numerous other beneficial uses that tires are being found to be used for as time goes on. So with these properly disposed of tires, here's a trend as far as what this looks like as far as over the years, the end of use scrap tires. So in that bottom right-hand side, the beneficial uses. So you can see over the years on the top part, there's been increasing amounts of tires that are being actually handled. So this is from the state, their scrap tire annual support report summary. And you can see that, more often than not, the tires are actually put into tire derived fuel and then into the landfill. So those are the two of the largest areas that we always end up putting tires at. And then the next is crumb rubber. More and more entities are actually looking at using crumb rubber for different beneficial means. And that actually is a really good thing because some of those properties do impact beneficially infrastructure and not just, reduction of overall waste. So that being said, those are all of the properly disposed of scrap tires. How about ones that we don't know about that aren't being properly disposed of? So that's what you see on this graphic right here. These are all of the known illegally dumped tire sites in Texas. This is what TCEQ knows about as of May of 2022. So you can see here on this big map, there are a lot of different sites, and as a lot of these are actually up to 2.5 million scrap tires in one location that you're seeing some of these green dots. As you can see on the bottom right-hand side, this is blown up to be our region. So not just the unincorporated rural areas, but those inner core cities are highly implicated on this map as well. So you end up looking at it, how many of those tires are actually here in our backyards? Well, as you can see immediately above that, the total number of illegally dumped tires that are known, of course, it's constantly being remediated. So there are constantly different efforts going on by state, federal, local, and even corporations that are helping out with trying to remediate and remove some of this scrap tire waste. However, it's just something that's continually going to be building up until there's more and more things that are being done about it. So not just on the remediation side, but also prevention. And so part of that goes into our policy body here, the Regional Transportation Council. They actually have gone through and approved some regional tire program funding. So it's dedicated funding of $490,000 from our Air Quality Initiatives Fund to help with being used in a tire program over the next few years. So that helps out with anything from being able to set up these types of programs, the creation of this regional tire task force, which was created back in 2021 before this was approved. And then coming up with things of different ordinances to help out, different ways of removing overall remediation effects or lessening the burden on mom and pop shop by collecting tires, all sorts of different things we're looking at doing in the near future here. So the Regional Tire Task Force was created in December 2021 in response to numerous meetings that we had where people were continually bringing up to us that tires were a major issue within their region. If there's one thing that they could fix from the local government standpoint, more often than not, that was the one that they were talking about the most. And these were in air quality discussions. So on an air quality side, we also decided to help out with that. So at that point, we became an interdepartment partnership between our transportation side and also our environment and development team here at the COG. And we started collaborating, came up with different strategies and implementations to address the overall 16 county region. So part of that ended up being the Regional Scrap Tire Model Ordinance. So that is a comprehensive plan and or model ordinance that comes up with that a city or county can adopt and edit readily in order to be used in their existing locales. So at that point, you can take these different ordinances or plans, and you can use them to help out with structuring an overall means of identifying and processing through scrap tires. The things that are most ideal about this is that actually ends up increasing the amount of accountability. So remediatory effects are awesome. We all want to see a cleaner environment. The issue is that so long as we're only at the back end and we're not taking care of things at the front end and the preventative and also the prosecution side, then we're not actually going to ever fully abate these types of issues, and we're always going to be on trying to catch up. So part of the regional scrap tire model ordinance allows these different areas to have different preventative effects while also putting in things for doing things of tire identification or different penalties that are being imposed upon the scrap tires. So that makes it to where there is an increased amount of accountability at the individual level as well as the level of corporations. So this leads also into the mobility plan bundle policy. So the sustainable tire recycling was actually included into this most recent bundle policy. And so these plans, there's about 1 in 20 of them, and it's a voluntary participation that your different cities and counties are able to work with, and that gets them transportation development credits. So it's money that they can use, points that they can use, which elicits money at a certain point to be useful for their own transportation, for their own funding and planning opportunities. So it helps them out by putting in something in place by setting up overall these types of policies, and while helping out with, reduction of waste in this case. So with that case, at that side of things, so that's all the things that we've been doing regionally. So our own local efforts. And as far as more down to that's from a top-down approach. And so what can we do here locally? So you can you can have increased education and training. So that goes to our elected officials, our code officers, our police officers. Those are typically the people who actually go through these types of trainings in order to know what to do about these tire mounds and the way that these are all supposed to be disposed of properly, and their mitigatory effects. However, that doesn't mean that individual people can't go through and do something about it. You can learn, you can end up doing some reporting in some of these resources. So part of that goes into these next three links, which are the legal dumping training, as well as a couple that are there for illegal dumping hotlines. So these help out with letting you know where are places that you can go for actually disposing of these wastes, different means that you can do so. And then also, if you see mounds of tires or just a tire here and there, you can actually report that tire or that location, and it'll go into a hotspot map that you can actually track over time to see where it is on if it's been remediated or not. I've actually done that myself personally with a large tire mound I found while I was just driving around. And it was, yeah, you laugh. And it was actually cleaned up very quickly. Within 3 weeks, whenever I went back, it was fully gone and I didn't see a single tire left over. So I can say that efforts are being made, but it takes all of us to do so. With that, thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, comments, please always feel free to reach out. There's my contact information, or you can go to our website and just type in the Regional Tire Task Force, and you'll see a lot more information about that as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Nick. That's great work there. I think we've all seen abandoned tires on the side of the road. So it's good to know that you guys are working on that. Up next, we've got John to talk a little bit about pavement and bridge performance measures.
Thank you. I'm here to talk about performance measures. So we support TxDOT targets as much as we can. We set the goals to help guide regional planning. We have limited means of being able to directly influence targets ourselves. So the best thing for us really is to support TxDOT targets wherever we can. And then making sure that our goals are in alignment with our MTP, our TIP, other planning documents, and the projects that we're involved with, so that we're always telling our story in relation to the things that we're doing for the region. This next slide shows the pavement and bridge condition is one of 5 groups of federal performance measures. The most recent target setting action for those has been completed. The check marks next to the 4 rulemakings listed above show the completed targets. We're now involved with pavement and bridge condition, which is the last of the targets to need new action. We report this through 4-year performance periods, and it's done typically at the beginning, middle, and end of each performance period. State DOTs are required to establish PM2 targets regardless of ownership. This slide shows that we have roughly 70,000 national highway system lane miles in the state. And in our region, we cover over 12,000 of those lane miles. Significant changes have happened between the first performance period and the second performance period per the federal regulations. During the first performance period, a measure called International Roughness Index, or IRI, was used to assess pavement condition for all non-interstate national highway system facilities. Roughness is typically something that was used as probably one of the best identifiers of this kind of linking satisfaction and performance. Typically, if the pavement that you're riding on is comfortable, if it's safe, then that really is a pretty good function of just how good the condition of the pavement is. Now we are judging pavement and bridge conditions using not only the International Roughness Index, but also by structural distress. This revived methodology will give us a better assessment of the pavement. Now, for good pavement, TxDOT has a positive desired trend. Essentially, they want to continue to increase good pavement. They're doing a good job at it. We're holding on to as much good pavement as we can while doing the most work to ensure that pavements do not fall into poor condition. On this slide, we show that we simply performed a trend analysis based on moving averages. We see how the latest observed data compares to the trend, and then we see how the 2024 and 2026 forecasts with the new trend will compare. Ultimately, the desire is for a positive trend. When you go to the poor condition, here's where you begin to see the major differences in that change of adding the cracking, the rutting, and the faulting for non-interstates. We were holding at around 14% for the first performance period because we were already including roughness as our major metric. But when we include cracking, rutting, faulting, the poor percentage pavements drop down 14% to 1%. So mostly this reflects the change in methodology. But this indicates that at least for interstates and all non-interstates that we're holding at a very, very low percentage. For the region, we're going to do the same thing as we discussed in good condition. One of the things that we will see in particular for on-system and off-system arterials were where we were at 22% and 70% condition. These numbers are going to fall substantially because of the new metric. And more than likely, the forecasted trend is not going to really reflect any significant change or major difference compared to what we have for the state. Here we showed the bridge analysis statewide. What the good and poor percentages reflect is that the total deck area of the bridges across the state, not the number of bridges. The good condition deck area is falling slightly, but the poor condition deck area is staying the same. So it's showing the new parameters are helping to give a better picture of the conditions. And here we show the bridge analysis for the region. In the region, we had enough data that we could go ahead and project a moving average trend. And you can see here that although we show that the latest observed data reflects less good condition to what we had previously, we believe that if you're going to go back to the overall length of data, that we're going to go back to 2012, this will fall off and it's short-lived. We think there's going to be the ability to bounce back from those trends in the future. Last year, we were looking at candidates for the bridge investment program. We were coordinating with local governments and the TxDOT Bridge Division and districts to analyze the bridges that were in poor condition. We submitted an infra grant and developed a strategic bridge program. Of the poor condition bridges, 37 were in the Dallas region and 12 were in the Fort Worth region. Of the 49 bridges in poor condition, all but 3 structures are funded, scheduled for construction, under construction, or completed. So based on this information, our plan up to this point is to continue with the action that we've taken previously. And that's for the council of governments to support statewide targets set for 2024 and 2026, both for good condition and poor condition. This is the schedule. TxDOT submitted the new PM targets to Federal Highway Administration back in February. This started the 180-day clock for our review. We took the information to STEC in May, and then it went to RTC last week to the public meeting today. Next, it'll go to STEC and RTC as action items before our August deadline. And here's our contact information if you need to contact us.
Great. Thank you, John. That's important information, especially as we saw the news overnight with Philadelphia and their bridge failure on I-95. So up next, our final presentation for today is with Vicki, and she'll tell us a little bit about our work program over the next 2 fiscal years.
Thank you, Shannon, and thanks again for all of you coming out to hear our information today. I'm going to report to you this afternoon on development of our Unified Planning Work Program. If you're not familiar with it, it is one of our federal requirements as a metropolitan planning organization. We do this process every 2 years. It represents our staff's work plan for utilizing federal formula funds to address the transportation and transportation-related air quality needs in our region, along with associated budget information. We initiated development of what we're calling our fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 Unified Planning Work Program back in February. This document will cover the time period of October 1st, 2023 through September 30th, 2025. Development of the work program is a cooperative effort. Correspondence in February was sent to our transportation partners in our metropolitan planning area. This included local governments, over 5,000 population, our transportation authorities, Dallas Area Rapid Transit, Trinity Metro, the Denton County Transportation Authority, small transportation providers, Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, the North Texas Tollway Authority, the Collin County Toll Road Authority, and the Texas Department of Transportation. In that correspondence, we requested ideas that those entities may have for regional transportation or related air quality planning studies that they'd like to see the Council of Governments conduct, or if there were specific areas that their entity needed technical assistance from Council of Government staff. Our third request was for items that maybe those respective entities were conducting within their own governments or entities that we would inventory in our work program. We have to show other planning activities that are going on in the region, not just those that we as a Council of Government staff are carrying out. So for the past 3 months, we have been working to develop the next work program. And we have been reviewing the project submittals that we receive from the local governments and evaluating whether they're eligible to be included in the document or not. So we have information for you this afternoon on development of the work program, but a full copy of the draft work program is available on our public involvement site. And it's also located on our internet site where the work program information. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So as I mentioned, it is a federal requirement. Our current surface transportation legislation is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So as we develop the work program, we have to make sure that we're meeting all the federal requirements. We have to make sure that we're including projects that address federal planning factors that have been identified by the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration, as well as the planning emphasis areas that those agencies have identified. But basically, our charge is to facilitate the development, management, and operation of an integrated intermodal system that enables the safe, efficient, and economic movement of not just people, but goods, and that we utilize a coordinated and performance-based approach in doing that. We think we have done a pretty good job doing that so far, and that our next work program just continues on with those types of activities. So the work program outlines the work activities, as I mentioned, to be conducted by the COG staff, but it also summarizes our allocation of funding. This next 2-year work program identifies federal formula funding in the amount of about $30 million. Now, that's just one of our funding sources, but that's kind of what drives the requirement to develop the work program. In addition to these federal formula funds, we receive a lot of grant money from other agencies such as the Department of Defense, the Department of Energy, Environmental Protection Agency. Maybe we get funding directly from Federal Highway Administration or the Federal Transit Administration. So there's a lot of different funding sources that go into the document for a lot of different projects. And although we're not required to do so, we do include all the activities that the council of government staff are involved in, not just those that we are federally required to do. We include our implementation activities as well, so that we have one document that you as the public or our committee members or whoever can go to and see everything we're working on. Like all the activities that you've heard the staff present to you this afternoon are documented in the work program, either the current work program or our new work program for the next 2 fiscal years. This funding is the projects and the funding, they're allocated to specific subtasks in the work program. A lot of them may cross jurisdictional boundaries, such as high-speed rail that we're looking at, or some are just directly to the entity, a specific technical assistance request that they may have for thoroughfare planning or a sub-area study in their area or something like that. This is the map, just kind of, if you're not familiar, we do, as you've heard in a couple of presentations before, the Council of Governments does have a 16 county area. Within that 16 county area is the Transportation Metropolitan Planning Area boundary, which is the 12 counties that you see kind of outlined in the gold line here. The air quality area, as you've heard mentioned earlier, on our non-attainment area for ozone is the gold colored counties and the pink Rockwall County. So that represents the COG region, the transportation planning area, and our non-attainment area. This is a rather large area. It has about 9,500 square miles. So you can imagine that's a big area. We're looking at both urban and rural activities when we're evaluating the transportation needs in those areas. And it's a pretty heavily populated area as well, with about 8.2 million people now and forecast to be 11 million people in 2045, the timeframe of our Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So we do have a standard format that we're required to follow in development of the work program. It comes to us through the Texas Department of Transportation. And within this structure, there are 5 major tasks. The first one is administration and management. So projects such as hosting this public meeting for you here today and just general administrative activities to continue the day-to-day operations of the department would be in task 1. Task 2 is where we house our data collection management activities, model development improvements, and demographic forecasting, things of that nature to help us drive our transportation models. Task 3 is going to have our transportation improvement program where we identify project funding that we're putting on specific transportation projects, as well as our transit, air quality, and congestion management planning and operations. As I mentioned, those 3 areas have most of our operations activities, and we're housing all of those in task 3. Task 4, you can kind of tell by the name, those are activities related to development and maintenance of our transportation plan, the long-range transportation plan. Currently, as I mentioned, out to year 2045 right now is our current plan. During the course of the next work program, we will be working on developing the 2050 Metropolitan Plan. And then everything else we do kind of falls in task 5, special studies. This area has, as I mentioned before, maybe where we do technical assistance projects and things of that nature related to corridor and sub-area studies, sustainable development, land use, our freight planning, safety and security of the system, aviation, automated vehicles and related technology, and the work we're doing to support our military installations. So as I mentioned earlier, we did go out to our partners in the region, getting ideas where they needed Council of Governments assistance. And we received about 31 projects from 13 agencies, and those agencies are listed here for your information. Staff recommendations on each of the submittals that we received have been provided to the entities through their Surface Transportation Technical Committee members, distributed at the committee's meeting last month. Some of the reasons for we did recommend that, I believe, does it say 8? Yeah, 18 projects be included and 13 not included. Some of the reasons for non-inclusion, maybe they're not eligible for our federal formula funds, or the efforts are being conducted by another agency, such as some of the projects the Texas Department of Transportation is already working on them or will work on them. or the efforts that's been requested is just outside the scope and capacity of our staff. This represents our funding summary for our federal formula funds that I mentioned to you earlier. So we are estimating that we will, I can't see that slide, I'll look at this one, that we will receive about 7.6 million in our Federal Transit Administration 5303 funds and about 20 million in our Federal Highway Administration PL funds. These two funding sources represent our federal formula funding that I mentioned earlier that we received through the state. And then we're right now on track of what we're anticipating at the close of this fiscal year, 2023, that we will carry over into fiscal year 24, about 5.5 million. So once we do that, that gives us about $33.2 million for us to program in funds over the fiscal years 24 and 25. So right now, based on the projects that we have included in the work program, we are expecting to expend about 28.4 million during the course of the 24 and 25 work program. If we do that, that will leave us about 4.8 million to carry over into fiscal year 2026. We always like to have carryover funds available. You never know if there's going to be a delay in reauthorization of the next surface transportation bill or what might happen. We call it kind of our rainy day fund. It's kind of our emergency fund if we should need it. So this has been our schedule. As I mentioned, we started in February. We have gone for information to our technical committee and our policy committee, the Regional Transportation Council. Copies of the document have been placed on our website for review if you as the public would like to go and view all the projects that are in there. It is on the public involvement site as well as our work program site. So today we initiated public outreach. We have a 30-day comment period. The document will be taken to our technical committee for action later this month, and then to the Regional Transportation Council and the Council of Governments Executive Board in July for their approvals. Once we receive those approvals, we will then transmit the document to the Texas Department of Transportation, who will then forward it on to the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transportation Administration for final review. We have provided a draft copy of the work program, the same copy that's posted on our website, to Texas Department of Transportation. They're undergoing a preliminary review of the document right now, as you all can during the comment period. So after we receive those, we will be as I said, sending it on. The final document is due to the Texas Department of Transportation by the end of July. So that represents my presentation. I would just like to flag that the work program, we call it, it's kind of referred to it as a snapshot in time. This is our best guess right now where we are in it. The agency is just starting its budget process. The Council of Governments is an agency, but the work program schedule is ahead of that. So we in transportation have already kind of done our budgets, put our information in. These are our best estimates, but some of that could change before the agency finishes its budget process and so forth. So some of the dollar amounts can change. And also we are constantly updating the document. I don't know how familiar you are with it, but we probably modify the work program about 6 times over the course of the 2 years as we receive new grant awards or project work scopes change or whatever might happen. We are constantly updating. It's kind of a living document. So this is just a snapshot right now on where we think we are. But that concludes my presentation. I guess, Shannon, we open up for questions if people have them.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you for all the presenters today. There was a lot of information and we appreciate everybody hanging with us during your lunch hour because there was a lot of information today. I did want to take a second to acknowledge Council Member Cherry Bryant from the city of Alvarado is joined us today. So thank you for being here. Now we'll move to the public comments section of our meeting. Thank you to everyone for holding your questions and comments until the end. Before we begin, let me review the ways to provide your input or ask questions on these topics. Written comments may be submitted directly through the meeting webpage at publicinput.com/NCTCOG June 23. Simply enter your comment in the box at the bottom of the page. Or you can email written comments to NCTCOG June 23 at publicinput.com. You can also text comments by texting the code NCTCOG June 23 to the number 855-925-2801. After you text the code, you will receive a reply prompting you to submit your comment. Standard messaging rates will apply. We also accept comments by fax and mail. Our fax number is 817-640-3028, and our mailing address, P.O. Box 5888, Arlington, Texas 76005. We are happy to provide hard copies of today's presentation materials upon request. We will now have an opportunity for in-person questions and live comments from our call-in number. To provide a comment or ask a question by phone, dial 855-925-2801. You will hear a prompt to enter a meeting code, enter 2463. To request to speak, press star, then the number 3. You will be placed in a speaker queue, but continue to hear the meeting audio until it is your turn to speak. Note that if you have been listening to the meeting on your computer, you will need to mute your computer speakers to avoid audio issues. Then at the start of your speaking time, please state your name as well as your city, organization, or affiliation. But if you don't want to speak live, but just leave a voicemail for us, you can do that by pressing star, then the number 2. Staff will return your call if needed. First, we will begin with in-person comments and then move to the call-in comments. After that, we'll take comments from the meeting webpage and text message as time allows. In the event that staff are not able to respond to all the web and text comments during today's meeting, we will provide responses as appropriate in the coming days. I do want to mention that we have already received several comments online related to I-345 in Dallas. So we will respond to those accordingly after the public meeting. So with that, I'm going to ask to see if we have any in-person. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Phyllis Silver,
Thank you. Welcome.
and my question is for Martin Bate on the presentation. By the way, I enjoyed all your presentations very much. On the ATS development study. On page 9, it refers to the Dallas International District. I don't live that far from there. I know that's the old Valley View Mall. In what way will the ATS be used? It says potential vehicles, guideway materials. Is this within the property to go from one, because I know it's going to be a park and retail and housing. What is your vision of how ATS is going to be used in that property?
Well, good afternoon. Thank you very much for the thoughtful question. We have a vision of the ATS for the International District that is largely based on a study that was commissioned in collaboration with Jacobs Engineering back in 2019. At the time, we called it the 2019 Midtown Study, and that is available on our website at nctcog.org/ATS, and that'll have a lot more detail. Generally, the vision that we're seeing for the ATS within the International District is that it'll allow for the circulation of people within the district itself. So going from the western end to the eastern end to the northern and southern, sort of circulating. Right now, the vision is to have it go down Alpha and Noel, and then this one road that the name escapes me, and then going up kind of not quite Montfort, but whatever road is right south of there going east-west, and then going up through where the former mall and where the AMC theater was that was recently demolished. In addition to that, we also are hoping that it'll be able to provide connections to the Dart light rail system, either using the same ATS solution or perhaps with a different solution, but either way, we want to provide those regional connections as well. So generally, I'd say that the main focuses for that project are internal circulation, and a lot of that will have to come down to the way that the city and the development itself sets up its parking strategy. And again, this was heavily outlined in the Jacobs study. There's a lot of very good recommendations in there that I think you'll find very insightful on how a successful ATS system could come to be. And then also providing regional links to our regional transportation system so that users and guests and employees and visitors are all able to get to the International District without necessarily having to drive if they so choose.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Martin. Are there other comments or questions from those in the room today? Okay. Jackie or Carly, do we have any written comments from today?
We do have quite a few written comments. Our first comment is from Hexel, Colorado. His question is on the topic of automatic people movers. What is the status of Las Colinas APT system? I observed just 2 weeks ago that lights were on in the APT towers. Can we expect Las Colinas APT to come back online in the near future? Everyone I talked to who's lived in Irving long enough to remember when it ran wishes it would come back. I believe there's an opportunity to improve efficiency of the light rail system and improve connectivity of urban centers districts by closing the Irving Convention Center station and activating the APT system in its place.
So regarding the comment on the Las Colinas APT, at this time, I do not believe that there's a current hard plan for reopening the APT. It was shut down early 2020, given a mix of factors, including COVID, and since then it has remained closed indefinitely. That being said, one of the outcomes from this ATS development study were insights on how we might be able to modernize and bring back the Las Colinas APT. I would advise that the commenter keep posted and keep apprised of some future developments we have. We're hoping to approach our committee very soon, our technical committee, with a request for funding to begin engineering feasibility and design for a pilot segment of modernization for the Las Colinas APT. We want to assess both the general cost of what it would take to modernize it from an infrastructure perspective, as well as vehicles. And from there, should it prove feasible, both operationally and in terms of cost, then at that point, we will be able to move into a discussion with both the city of Irving and the Dallas County Utility and Reclamation District, which oversees the APT, about potentially modernizing the rest of the system and other future plans for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our second comment is from Morgan Chivers. Her comment is, why are sidewalks being built or rebuilt with no curb cuts at driveways and intersections? Shouldn't new builds and repairs all automatically update to current standards? This seems like a really simple thing to start making such much needed improvements to our region's bikeability and accessibility.
Okay. So while we didn't have a presentation on that today, I think in general, we would certainly agree. It would definitely depend on exactly where those sidewalks are, and we may need to engage the local government to maybe further have those conversations. So if she may want to respond back to where she observed those new sidewalks going in, that would be helpful. I apologize. I kind of went out of order, so I'm sorry, Jackie. I threw Jackie off. I think we were supposed to go to the call-in comments, but I wanted to make sure that we addressed everybody in person first. So it appears that we no longer have, or we do not have any other in-person comments. So why don't we see if we have any call-in comments? As a reminder, if you're listening and wish to provide a comment by phone, dial 855-925-2801. You will hear a prompt to enter a meeting code, enter 2463. If you do not wish to have your comment addressed during the meeting, you may leave a voicemail for staff by pressing star, then the number 2. If you would like to request to speak during the meeting, press star, then the number 3. You'll be placed in a queue and continue to hear the meeting audio until it is your turn to speak. If you've been listening to the meeting on your computer, you will need to mute your computer speakers to avoid audio issues at the beginning of your comment. Then at the start of your comment, please state your name, then your city, organization, or affiliation. Do we have anyone on the phone?
We have someone on the phone line. Caller, I'm going to place you in queue. If you will please state your name and affiliation, and then you can provide us with your comment and questions.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. My name is Hexel, Colorado. My address is 2124 North Garrett Avenue in the city of Dallas. I have prepared 3 minutes of commentary regarding my disapproval of TxDOT's refined hybrid option and urging NCT-COG to commission a study independent from TxDOT in assessing alternative options for the future of I-345, including its removal and replacement with a comprehensive boulevard system. In respect for time, this is a multifaceted issue, and I've already submitted one of these facets regarding I-345 and that is the facet regarding the destructive history of the highway, as well as the existing highway's incompatibility with the new growth that we're projecting by 2045, and the danger that it imposes on aging residents of Southern Dallas. That's a facet that I posted in a written comment. And so in the next 2 minutes, I'll quickly touch on the facets of solutions to the socioeconomic divide between Southern Dallas and the northern suburbs. For decades, we know people of Southern Dallas drive to jobs north of city limits, and we need to ask why. Let's narrow down to a specific example. Why can we not attract a major grocery store to South Dallas? Committees on this topic have heard the same old reasons. Number one, not enough people. A standard grocer needs 15,000 people in one market with no major competition to be interested in an area. Remember this point, this number about no major competition for a later point. Number two, low median income. A mixed income population is needed to balance the books to sustain a standard grocer. And number three, higher income residents of South Dallas simply drive outside the neighborhood when they want to shop. And for decades, we've interpreted these as excuses rather than as interconnected reasons. There is no incentive to shop locally when it is easier to drive 10 minutes off the freeway than to walk 15 minutes down the street. Yes, freeways are connectors to jobs, but there's the kind of connector that chains people of color to service in ever farther lands, thereby stealing opportunity away from home. Replacing the interstate that does not, quote, cut off, quote, jobs. It may slow down the drive, but that is a feature, not a bug. Regarding the first reason stated for not having a grocery chain, TxDOT themselves estimated in 2016 that 12,000 new residents would be housed through their boulevard option, that over double the size of downtown's current population. The second reason regarding median income, new housing created by the new district would absorb thousands of market rate renters whose spending power can sustain new southern grocers. Now, the third issue regarding how people drive outside the neighborhood, for high income residents, the incentive shifts where it is better for them to shop locally than to shop in the latest, flashiest development north of the city. Stringtown, the Freedman town that was paved over to build I-345, is a 13-minute train ride from Hatcher Station, 19-minute bus ride from Bonton Farms, and a 19-minute bike ride from Lincoln High School. By combining in our existing public transit system, even before DART Zoom 2.0 or accessibility, the entirety of South Dallas is within a 25-minute commute without a car when you combine cycling, walking, and transit to the I-345 corridor. Compare that to the average daily commute of 40 minutes for many Dallas residents, which only grows longer each year. Investment from downtown radiates southward when you consider how close South Dallas is to downtown, especially the 345 corridor. The land directly underneath I-345 is the easiest to reach without a car, both from South Dallas and by the entire city and its suburbs. This land should be saturated with housing, productive uses, and human activity. Instead, more than half of it is wasted on the highway and parking for cars coming off that highway. An investment in rebuilding the highway is to keep Dallas chained to a longer and longer commute. But to replace the highway with a mixed-use, walkable district is to make good on the promise of our $6 billion hub-and-spoke mass transit system to, in the very literal sense, bring the city together. With that, you can expect more comments from me in the future, but for now, I want to use this opportunity to remind the council to please invest in an independent study that would pursue alternatives other than a highway for the center of our city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Colorado. Your comments have been registered. Jackie, is there anybody else in queue?
There is no one else in queue, but we do have one more written comment.
Okay.
It is from an anonymous. It says NCTCOG should work to move existing transit expansion plans in the region forward, as well as build new services in preparation for the 2026 World Cup. To put it simply, we will look like a joke to our international visitors if venues like the AT&T Stadium remain inaccessible via a semi-frequent, reliable transit link beyond driving in the clogged freeways of Arlington. In my humble opinion, a transit link to one of the largest entertainment districts in the region should already be a thing, but better soon than never.
Great. Thank you. I will actually take that comment as the manager for the transit program. So that's an excellent comment and observation. And I think I definitely wholeheartedly agree with you. We are working almost daily with all of the partners related to bringing the World Cup. We've already started meeting with individuals from certainly not only Arlington, but our transit authority to the west, the Trinity Metro, as well as all of the partners within the entertainment district. We're talking the Rangers, the Cowboys, AT&T Stadium, Lowe's, Texas Live. So those meetings have started to occur. We've started actually inventorying the things that need to be done in advance of the World Cup. And so we also, in advance of the World Cup next year, will be hosting some other major events in the region or in that area. So we're actually trying to get sort of like phase 1, phase 2 type stuff done in advance of that. So I'm hopeful that with the coordination efforts especially for the World Cup, some of those will outlive those special events and that we will have, again, more accessible transit options to the entertainment district for not only the residents, but the visitors to our region. So thank you for your comment.
Anonymous actually has another comment. It says, to ask an associated question, does NCT-COG have any plans with the relevant partners to address unmet transportation needs in preparation for the World Cup and to Arlington in general? I know COG has or intends to study a Fort Worth to Dallas high-speed rail link. Is that something that could be pursued more aggressively?
So my response would be very similar to what I just stated for the other about the coordination in advance of the World Cup. So those coordination efforts are definitely underway. But as far as the high-speed rail, unfortunately, I don't think we have enough time to be able to get anything actually implemented in advance of that. But that is certainly something that will help bring events like this back to our region in the future once we're able to get those services implemented for our region.
That is it for the web phone comments.
Okay. Well, great. Well, again, thank you everybody who participated virtually as well as everybody who is in the room with us. I did want to just do a quick reminder that there was another topic related to the comprehensive list of funded projects through the Transportation Improvement Program that we are seeking review and input on, as well as those that you heard today. So seeing no other comments, we will adjourn today's meeting. Thank you again for participating. Please refer to the meeting webpage or notice you received if you wish to provide your comments after the meeting ends. If you're watching a recording of this meeting, you can provide comments through all the ways outlined during the meeting. As a reminder, the comment period for these topics end on Tuesday, July the 11th. And again, we thank everybody for their time today.